This was materialized by Sai Baba in early 1970. It was my first visit to Baba, and the day before I was to leave, he looked at me and he acknowledged that I was leaving, and then with his hand made that motion, closed his fist, and when he opened it, there it was.
As a diamond glows, so shall the light on the tower of the Lord, the prophet of the new age. One stone on his finger is worth more than all the world's treasures. Even those who by accident help the teachings of the prophet will receive in return 100-fold. Already many warriors of the teaching of truth are reborn. Only a few years shall elapse before everyone shall hear the mighty steps of the Lord of the new era.
Walter and Elsie Cowan had an incredible story to tell after their last visit to Sai Baba. Mrs. Cowan lives in Santa Ana, California. Her husband died in June 1973.
It was on Christmas that I was taken sick with pneumonia and died on Christmas Eve about 2.5, 3 hours later. My lungs filled up with phlegm and I just smothered to death.
The hotel had been alerted and a doctor was on his way.
The doctors pronounced that I was dead, and they loaded me into this morgue wagon and shut the door, but it didn't lock. And every time it would stop at a crossing, my body would roll back and forth, and when it stopped or started up, it would roll the other way, and I was very much afraid my body was going to go out onto the street. I knew I was dead, but my consciousness kept going along at all times. And I tried to convey to the drivers to shut the back door, lock it. And they, of course, I couldn't get through to them at all. And I was fretting about that until we got to the morgue, and they took me out. And the two men carried me in the stretcher and dumped me on the bed. And didn't straighten my legs out. One leg was above the other, and I was quite concerned about the lack of feeling or care they were giving to me. I could see it, but I couldn't convey anything to them. The nurse came in and straightened my body out and put cotton in my mouth and nose and in my ears and pulled a sheet up over my head. And I was thoroughly satisfied then, and I sort of figured that was the end of my body, and I was completely free. I had absolutely no fear at any time, and dying is a pleasure. It is not a hardship. And then I found myself in a great hall with Sai Baba alongside of me. Sai Baba talked with me while I was there in this large hall and asked me whether I wanted to return to my body or not. I thought of my wife, and there is a definite inborn feeling in every man to preserve his body and his physical life. And that had quite a factor, I think. If it wasn't for that innate desire, there probably wouldn't be too many people on earth. Well, Sai Baba said that I did not complete the work that I had intended to do. that I was born to do. And he arose and addressed the judge, and very respectfully, and the judge was very respectful to him. He knew him apparently very well. And he said, this soul has not completed the work that he was born to do. And I most respectfully ask that this soul be returned to his body in order that he might complete the work that he was born to do and to further my work. And the judge looked at us for a second or two and said, so be it.
And then we were told that Baba came in the night and took off the sheet and unstuffed his nose and eyes and whatever they do at that time, and rubbed Babudi on his chest and breathed the breath of life in him.
And the next thing I knew, I was right back standing alongside my body, back in the hospital. Then I opened my eyes, and I looked at my body and I said, I might have made this mistake in deciding to return to it. It seemed like going right back into a cesspool. And I hesitated, and I said, I'm into it now, I might as well carry it on. And so I went into my body, and that very instant I was right back into the old grind of breathing and trying to get my breath and going through all the sufferings of a person as sick as I could be and still be alive. And I opened my eyes and saw my wife. I said, you look beautiful in pink.
Richard Bock, a successful record producer, initiated and administers with his wife Janet the Los Angeles Sai Baba Center.
Sai Baba says that there is nothing that isn't God, that this whole creation is just an expression of God, and so we are all part of God in the same way that he is part of God. He's expressing that aspect in a way that is far more visible than most human beings. Therefore, some people like to think that he is God. And he's saying, yes, but so is everything else.
Indra Devi is a Sai Baba devotee who is internationally known as a yoga teacher and author of several books on yoga.
When I first time saw Baba, and this was in 1966, one of his devotees told me so many stories about his miracles, but there is one which I always was longing to see, because I saw everything. But she said about him gathering sand on the river and then just making a little drawing and taking out the thing he was drawing. This I've never seen before. All the miracles of Baba, or as he calls them, Leelas, which means plays, divine plays, are nothing in comparison to a real miracle, which is completely changing a person, no matter how cynical, how unbelieving, how hard-boiled he or she may be.
Well, we didn't know anything about spirituality anyway. Most of us, we had never meditated before. We never, we were just never into anything. I mean, we just stepped off the streets. 90% of us were like hippies and street people and, like that. And so everything, it was such a shock to us to have this love and to have this, that we were still working out things between us, like we'd have a lot of fights with each other and heavy things like that, We didn't, and when we got mad at someone, we never thought the anger was within ourselves. We thought it was their fault, because we didn't know these things were in us. And now, slowly, but now, anything like that comes up, like anger or greed or jealousy, we never blame it on the other person. We know, like, it's us now, I think we have a better idea of what we're working on. Swami's love was so incredible. We'd never experienced anything like that. we didn't think of him as God or anything like that, really dramatic. We thought he was our mother and father, and we were just so frank with him. We just talked to him like we talk to each other, and he'd be the same. He brings so much happiness into people's lives. That's his biggest miracle, the love that he gives everyone. And you know, after they see Swami, their face is so shiny, so radiant. The festival times are just so beautiful. How just masses and masses of people are just so quiet, you know, and just tears in their eyes because of their love of Swami.
Hollywood film producer Joe Riordan and his wife Diane are devotees of Sai Baba, after a good bit of initial resistance on Joe's part.
Diana, my wife here, arrived back from India and started to tell me about Sai Baba. Of course, I thought she was insane. And at many parties, she would mention his name and the miracles he performed. Eventually, I got to the point where I was up to here with Sai Baba. And I used to say to him, look, I don't want to hear about this character. So eventually, Diana convinced me to read 2 books on Sai Baba. So I read the 2 books, and I presented it to friends of mine who were in the theatrical business. And their reply was, well, or what are you going to ask him for? So my reply was always, well, there's not much I need right at the moment. And what I think I'll ask him for is a rainbow. So they all laughed at this. Well, to cut the story short, we took off and we went to India. And after unpacking our car, we took off and we went to the top of the mountain. We got up to the top of the mountain. There was a young lady sitting there that we had met previously in Bangalore. While they were sitting there talking amongst themselves, I glanced over at Diana's shoulder. And as I did, slowly, appearing over her right shoulder, a rainbow. And it started straight up, never curved. I said to Diana, take a look over your shoulder. She looked over her shoulder and she said, oh my God. Well, that evening, around 7 or 8 o'clock, a man came to our door, knocked on it and said, Mr. Riordan, Sai Baba would like to see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Well, at 9 o'clock in the morning, we were there. Truthfully, I felt like an idiot, but a little bit still stunned about that rainbow. I think about 5 minutes passed by in silence when all of a sudden I see these bare feet in this robe appear, and down comes this bushy character's hair out to here, big smile on his face, and I must admit, warmth that I've never felt before. And he walked over to me, and he looked me square in the eyes, and he slapped me across the shoulder, and he says, how are you, character?
Janet Bock.
This was materialized by Sai Baba in early 1970. It was my first visit to Baba, and the day before I was to leave, he looked at me and he acknowledged that I was leaving, and then with his hand made that motion, closed his fist, and when he opened it, there it was.
Dr. Samuel Sandweiss, a San Diego psychiatrist, may or may not represent the skeptic in each of us, given the opportunity to inform our skepticism with personal experience. His impressions are the result of 3 trips to Putta Party.
Many people have asked me this question, if whether the phenomena I saw was a mass hysteria or mass delusion, mass hypnosis, neurosis, psychosis, or whatever the term. And it's my firm belief, after living with him and experiencing him for 1 month, that he is genuine and authentic, and what he does is genuine and authentic. I say that it's clearly beyond my comprehension.
A direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda and founder of Ananda Community Ashram has this to say about his visit to Sai Baba.
Many people have asked me to give my impressions of Sathya Sai Baba. On the subject of Sai Baba, India seems fairly evenly divided. Some say his miracles are a purely divine work. Others claim they are ego-motivated. But he does many things besides materialize objects, and some of his miracles, at least, would not be possible if they were rooted in ego. He has changed countless lives for the better. He has saved innumerable people from tragedy, oftentimes when they prayed to him mentally from a distance of hundreds of miles. Baba's teachings are all of divine love, service, humility, and surrender to God's will. With every materialization to which I was a witness, I could observe no desire on Baba's part to impress others. My impression, rather, was that his entire thought was centered on giving to them and not on receiving anything in return. In fact, I'm told he won't accept anything even if it's offered to him. Close disciples of his have told me Baba considers his materializations quite insignificant, almost as if to say, look how easily material objects can be brought into manifestation. Why consider it worth your while to run after them? He stresses renunciation and non-attachment. My meeting with Sri Sathya Sai Baba was a great inspiration to me.
Dr. Jack Hislop, president of the Sathya Sai Baba Society of America, gives us a prophetic glimpse into the future.
There's a lot of interest in the Prema Sai Baba ring because if you look into the 21st century, Swami created this ring for me several years ago. First, he had given me a very big gold ring with the portrait of himself on the ring, raised in gold relief. So the very next morning, he took it away from me again and said to me, well, Hislop, would you prefer to have Sathya Sai or Prema Sai? So I didn't know what to answer, really, so I said, Swami, let it be your will. So he said, all right, then let it be Prema Sai. So he took this very heavy gold ring between thumb and forefinger, just breathed on the ring one time, and lo and behold, there was this ring. The gold ring had changed to a silver ring with this portrait of Prema Sai. Prema, of course, means love, and Prema Sai is the incarnation of Sathya Sai Baba, which will herald an era of peace and love in the Western world.